Welcome to 10-5, the official podcast of the OPP Association. I am your co-host, Scott Mills.
And I'm your other co-host, Emily Brown. For those new listeners, the OPP Association represents nearly 10,000 members of the Ontario Provincial Police in Canada. Our members are at the heart of everything we do, and we're dedicated to keeping our members and the public informed about key issues that impact policing across Ontario.
Thank you, Emily. Today's guest is OPPA Director and former OPPA President Rob Jamieson. And Rob is retiring after 30 years of service as a member of the OPP, including a 5-year term as president of the OPP Association. And he has written a book that's coming out very soon, which we will discuss a little later in the podcast. So welcome, Rob, and congratulations, you made it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Scott and Emily. Thanks for the invitation to be on the podcast. It truly is an honor.
Well, congratulations to you, Rob, and welcome to the podcast. We want to discuss your career in depth, as you've done a lot and are a very inspiring voice, especially for, younger people who might be interested in becoming an officer with the OPP. So right off the top, can you tell us what you feel is your biggest accomplishment?
Yeah, sure. I'd say personally it would be my family, my wife and my daughters, and just the incredible people that they are. But from a professional standpoint, I'm going to say that my most professional, something I'm the most proud of, would be the Encompass Mental Health and Wellness Program. Obviously, we're going to touch upon that. We're going to get into it later in the podcast. So I'll leave it at that. This program is what I am most proud of. And I just want to thank everyone that's involved. It truly was a team effort. It is my privilege to serve our members in our community, and I'm truly grateful for everyone who had a hand in making Encompass what it is today. It's been quite the journey.
Indeed, Rob. I came into the OPPA when you were on that journey, and I'm looking forward to talking about a little bit more in depth later on here. But first of all, before you even ever got involved in the association, you were quite an active individual in the community and in the OPP as well. And I was wondering if you could give us a chronology of your career. And I know that's a bit of an open-ended question, but I feel that many people don't know all that you have done. I've been privileged to actually hear a lot of that. And your career, I believe, is a great example of the many opportunities that are available for a new recruit. And I know we have people that want to become police officers listen to this podcast regularly, and so maybe provide a little inspiration for them, Rob.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm happy to do that, and I appreciate your kind words. And I would just say, before I get into any of that, I just want to say, a shout out to the OPP recruitment team. And if they are, there's people that are out there and they're interested in a career in law enforcement. The OPP is such a great organization, and their motto is like always hiring. So I'd be remiss if I didn't start off by giving them a shout out. And it's a great organization. I grew up in Port Perry, Ontario, which is about an hour northeast of Toronto. And in 1989, I went off to Thunder Bay to Lakehead University, and I took outdoor recreation and geography. And honestly, it's one of the life-changing events I had prior to becoming a police officer, because, I lived in residence a couple of years. I lived with a student with quadriplegia, and it was just, I was his live-in caregiver, and I learned so much from him, just about life and keeping a can-do, a positive attitude. And then I got into student politics. So 93, 94, I was the president of the Lakehead University Student Union. And one of the groups that I had an opportunity to represent at that time was the Lakehead University Native Student Association. So it was called LUNSA. So, and from there, I learned so much from Indigenous people. At that time, Lakehead had approximately 10% of its campus, or the students, were Indigenous, Inuit, Métis, First Nation. So It was something. Some of the things I learned certainly were things that I never had heard growing up or read in any textbooks. So for me, learning that and learning some of those things, and then being on the board of governors of the university, and then graduating, and then starting the recruitment process for the OPP while I was in Thunder Bay, moving back to Port Perry, completing that recruitment process. I found myself in April of 1995, 30 years ago, attending Brampton Academy of the Ontario Provincial Police. At that time, our OPP Academy was in Brampton. It closed in 97, and it was quite the spot, but I was part of Class 244, and it was an amazing group of people who I'm friends with many of these people today. We have our yearly get-together. There's quite a few of us that get together, and we have a great time. But once I was at the academy, I was stationed in Dutton Detachment. That's where I started my career as a rookie, as a recruit, which is about half an hour west of London. And there were two main areas of interest when I was there. We had about 45 kilometers of 401, so I interacted regularly with members of organized crime, specifically outlaw motorcycle gangs. And I remember when I was first out, I was on probation, and I was with a senior officer, and a member went by of an outlaw motorcycle gang, and I didn't understand really exactly what it was all about at the time, and he was explaining to me the patch and all the different meanings. And so we had pulled him over and had a conversation. And from there, I was it kind of sparked my interest about outlaw motorcycle gangs. So at that time, we had a clubhouse not far from the detachment, and it was the Annihilators motorcycle gang. And I spent a lot of time with them and interacting and gathering intelligence and tracking their movements. And at that time, we were doing things, people will remember, street checks, and it was intelligence-led policing, and I just absolutely love that. The Annihilators then became the Loners Motorcycle Gang, and I interacted with them. Many of the same members were in there, and hang-arounds, associates, whatever. And then I was seconded into the Biker Enforcement Unit in 2000, and at that time, they had become the Bandidos Motorcycle Gang. And the other area of interest I had when I started at Dutton Detachment was we also assisted First Nations officers on the territories of Oneida, Chippewa, and Munsee. And I was on the territories and the communities quite regularly. And, from my previous teachings, it was almost seamless. And being from a small town, I always told the recruits when I was an instructor later in the academy, you may not know everybody, but at the same time, they know who you are. And I had great relationships with the folks in those communities. And you know what? It was very respectful. And I really, really enjoyed working within the territories and outside as well. So I was seconded to the Biker Enforcement Unit in 2000. And from there, I went back on the road for a year in 2002 in Dutton, and then transferred in 2003. Simultaneous to all this, though, in 1995, when I got on, I went to my first branch meeting of the OPP Association. And so that's a running timeline the entire time. I started out as a director. I moved on to a vice president. And then in 2002, I was the acting president of 2 branch of the OPP Association. When I left at the end of that year and I transferred to Nottawasaga, just outside of Barrie, it was the time that the civilians had come on board the OPP Association, and the OPP Association was representing our civilians at the same time after that. So getting to Nottawasaga, I went on the road pretty much right away, but within a few months I was asked to join the Nottawasaga Dufferin Crime Unit. So just like any crime unit, you investigate homicides, robberies, sexual assaults, of children or adults, whatever, frauds. It was just more complex investigations, major crime. And it was a great go, but it was the first opportunity where I really started to recognize what I know now as sanctuary trauma and moral injury and those sorts of things. So at that point...
Hey, Rob, can I interrupt you there? I'm really interested in sanctuary trauma and moral injury, and I know a lot of people listening are. And we want to continue with your career there, but I think this is a really good segue talk a little bit about your new book, and because I had the opportunity to read a draft of your new book, and sanctuary and trauma and moral injury was mentioned in the book, and I know some people don't know what that is. So can you tell us what sanctuary trauma and moral injury is before you get into the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I would describe sanctuary trauma. It's a type of psychological trauma that occurs when someone experiences more trauma in a place that's expected to be safe. It can happen when someone seeks help from an organization or a service provider, but instead experiences further harm. So that's kind of how I would look at sanctuary trauma. Moral injury, I would describe it as a psychological response to doing or failing to do or witnessing something that goes against one's morals. It can cause, feelings of guilt, shame, anger. And I would also describe it, moral injury, as an injury to the soul. So they're super, super powerful things, which has really affected the health and well-being of many people within the Ontario Provincial Police.
Well, thanks for that. That's a very comprehensive definition, and I think as you move on here and kind of tell your experience with it, definitely people, you need to read this book. But can you share with us what your point just before I rudely interrupted you there, Rob?
No, actually, I'm glad that you did, because I really struggle with talking about myself, but I understand the reasons why sometimes that we do this. So, I've been around so many people in this organization that have had incredible careers, and I consider myself fortunate just to be around these incredible police officers and civilians of law enforcement. So, I've never really talked about what I'm going to talk about here, and this isn't in the book, but when I was in Nottawasaga, Dufferin, I was in the crime unit. After a few years, the sanctuary trauma, the moral injury started to compile, and you could sort of feel the walls starting to close in on our unit. And this was around 2007. And like I said, I've never talked about this before. And, they started a review on our crime unit to sort of see, it really smacked of disguised discipline the entire time that this was happening. And, it got so bad after a period of time. It was sustained over probably a 6-month period where you felt the walls closing in and that something was going to happen. And I remember looking up on the schedule, and some of us that were in the unit, is like our time in the crime unit stopped. Like they actually posted a schedule where certain people's schedules went on and other people's schedules ended. And, and it just was like, I said, listen, I have no problems going back on the road. I love the road. That's some of my most favorite times. But what happened is, you get people, and I've never subscribed to this and I've never understood this, but you get certain people that are in positions of authority that sort of, align with each other, and they think that this behavior is acceptable. And in fact, it's not. So what happened is we got called off site, and they said, you, and you, this is where you're going, this is what you're doing. And I remember when they said to us, and they said to me, and Scott, you've known me a long time, and and people know me, and for those that know me, they looked right at me and they said, you know what, we don't want you in this unit anymore. We think that you're unapproachable, you're this and you're that. And I'm thinking, my God, where's this coming from? And, it was just devastating. But there was a part of me that actually, I was glad that the disguised discipline and the sanctuary trauma and all that stuff, I'm glad it was over. And it was almost like we had been targeted within the workplace over a sustained period of time. And it was incredibly impactful. And you can only imagine, and for those that have experienced this in the workplace, whether it's the OPP or it was another organization, it is what it is. I went back on the road, and within a year, I was promoted to team leader, platoon sergeant at the same detachment. So, what was smacked as disguised discipline before, I was able to get into a position. And the reason why I sought promotion was I wanted to be the leader of people that I didn't always have. So that's kind of that's kind of my example there, Scott, where it was incredibly impactful. And what we have to always be mindful of is that we also have lives outside of this organization that, depending on what's going on in your life, the last thing you expect that you want to happen is when you go to work, you have to deal with the weight of other people's insecurities or whatever it is, and the abusive or the bullying behavior within the workplace. And I can tell you, I've never stood for that. And obviously, fast forward as the president, I never, it's one of these things that, I could turn this podcast into a whole afternoon here, Scott and Emily. But I know that's not the point. But the point is, and unbeknownst to me at the time, there were examples of this sort of thing happening elsewhere in the organization. And quite frankly, it was incongruent with the mission and the vision and the values that the OPP was stating at the time. This stuff should never happen. There actually should never be a review of anything. What that is a failure of leadership. And I've never understood why certain things are reviewed. For me, I've felt strongly about that. And then obviously getting promoted into a position of team leader. I absolutely love my people. And we had a great relationship. And it's always about raising people up, talking to your people, leading your people, empowering your people. And it's interesting. I look at some of the people that were on the platoon years ago with me. Many of them have been promoted beyond to sergeant and to staff sergeant and beyond. And, they'll come up to me years later, or the recruits that we put through at the academy. And it's always this approach. And I can honestly, wherever I go, keep my head high, because it's always in how you treat people. And I'm very proud of how I've treated people.
Well, thanks, Rob. That's you're being very open and honest, and I'm sure the listeners are going to appreciate that. And perhaps many or a few could definitely empathize with your situation there. And I'm sure that by sharing your journey, it's going to be helpful to others who may be experiencing similar feelings of their own. And
if I could, sorry, Scott.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I know it's interactive and we're back and forth, but I just want to say that I've also experienced some incredible people at all levels of the organization, whether they be civilians of law enforcement, whether they be commissioned officers or non-commissioned officers. They exist, and the vast majority of the people in the organization are good, well-intentioned people. But it's these pockets that I experienced, and that's specifically what I'm talking about. So I just wanted to make sure I'm 100% clear on that. We have some incredible people, but we also have some people that, quite frankly, needed their behavior to be checked.
I've got a question. I'm not quite sure why this is coming into my mind, but it's about service away from policing. And I know you're going to get into a bit later, kind of when you kind of stepped away for a bit. More than once, actually. And you've described a situation that clearly was stressful for you in your career. Is volunteering when you're off something totally away from police work? Is that beneficial? Is it supported by the employer? What's your experience with that?
It's absolutely supported by the employer, and I absolutely recommend and suggest to people to continue. I know so many people that volunteer in the community and sit on boards and do all these things, and that's quite honestly it's the law of averages. Most of the people that I've ever represented on this organization or had the privilege to or worked with or known, everybody's doing something, whether that's the coach of a hockey team or giving back. But in my particular circumstance, so I re-engaged with Lakehead University in 2006 when they opened the Aurelia campus of Lakehead University, and I was on the advisory board of the campus at that time, and I rejoined the Alumni Association of Lakehead University as a director. So it was a not-for-profit, but with the university, and sort of followed that through from 2006. So as I said, this stuff in the crime unit was going on in 2007, and it was a great opportunity to have an outlet and to be around an environment that was positive. So I always recommend people that, diversify. Don't always put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify. Be there with your family. Be there doing something in the community. And for me, I followed that along. I became the vice president, then I became the first president ever in the history of the Alumni Association of Lakehead University between 2012 and 2014 who was elected into that position or appointed into that position, to represent, at that time, it was 60,000 alumni from around the world. So, in obviously dealing with incredible people at the university, leaders, provincial politicians, just incredible stuff.
So do you have to get a permission? Do you have to declare what you're volunteering for with the organization, with the OPP?
Well, it's in my situation there, I never did because, it was interesting. The OPP would be at many of the events that I would be at, especially in Aurelia, you would have so many people coming and going and whether it was graduation or it would be the children of the people that I worked with or in the communities that would be graduating from Lakehead. So, depending on what it is, obviously if there's a conflict of interest or if there's something that, poses a real or perceived conflict of interest with your role as a professional police officer or a civilian of law enforcement, then that might garner a conversation. But nothing that I ever did had that conflict. And, it was basically giving back. It was voluntary. And it was incredible to be part of a board which actually prepared me well for when I took on the position as president and CEO of the Ontario Provincial Police Association.
Well, thanks for that, Rob. So we're going to circle back to what we were originally talking about, going, a little bit through your career journey. And so you spoke about the biker enforcement unit, and I understand you returned to the frontline duty after your years there. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. So I went back for a year at Dutton Detachment. I transferred to Nottawasaga. I was in uniform frontline for a few months and then went straight into the crime unit. And we kind of discussed a little bit about that earlier, but from there, I decided to, try for promotion, and I was promoted into team leader, platoon sergeant at Nottawasaga OPP, the same detachment that I had come from and experienced sanctuary trauma and moral injury while in the crime unit not that long before that. So at the end of the day, I went for promotion because one of the sole reasons why I wanted to be the leader for people that I didn't always have. And, that's truly what motivated me. I'm always motivated by certain things. And in that case, that's what it was. So I did that for a few years. And then in 2010, the detachment commander came to me and he came to all the sergeants there and said, hey, listen, Professional Standards is having a 3-month secondment, and they're bringing in sergeants from around the region. And I was wondering if you wanted to do that. And I said, respectfully, no, I do not. And for those that may not know and that are listening, Professional Standards is internal affairs. And I definitely never saw myself in that position. He came around again and said, hey, listen, other folks also don't want to do it. But I think you'd be good with your crime background and everything else, the way you see the world and so on and so forth. So I said, sure. I said, let's do it. I went home, had a conversation with my family, and I said, okay, I'll take this on. And I went in for 3 months. I was there for almost 4 years. And I saw firsthand the stressors that were placed on officers and their families, and specifically with police oversight and investigations. So it was really, really awesome position to be in, where you think about, not that long ago, experiencing some stuff myself within the workplace and seeing other people, and then seeing a complaint process that in some cases was being abused by members of the public who would put in nefarious public complaints in an effort to leverage a ticket or to get back at somebody, or internal complaints that would come in. And for example, a few times I would go to the senior command within Professional Standards and say, this internal complaint has come in from an area of the field, but I get the sense that we're trying to fix someone's problem or something that hasn't been resolved for a long period of time in a work location. And to me, that's unacceptable. I think you need to work some of those problems locally and treat your people well. And you can see it. Like, it was interesting. I was just recently in a work location in the OPP, and a guy I know has gone in there, and he's a leader, and he has managed to just turn that whole place around. it's a relatively young work environment. And so I always take the time whenever I hear good, bad, whatever about people. I said, hey, what is it that you respect about so-and-so? And they're like, he's out there working with us. He builds us up. He holds us accountable. And it's just, it's so great to hear. So a real credit to that work environment, credit to leadership. And I really think the right people in the right positions can make all the difference in the world. So I saw some of that stuff when I was in professional standards. One of the challenging things, and near, I was there for, I was assigned there on just under 4 years. So you did criminal investigations, Section 11 investigations, which run parallel to the SIU, which is conduct, service, and policy. You've got internal complaints and public complaints. And so, it's just, the stuff I saw there really, really allowed me to get a wider view of everything and the types of things that officers and civilians of law enforcement experience within this organization, and the impact either through vicarious trauma or the trauma that the individual has that gets in the stressors that gets passed on to families. It's incredibly destructive. And obviously I have examples that that I could always share, but where I've saw the stress firsthand. And it's just while I was in professional standards, actually, there was an investigation. I was on a team of many, many people, but one of the people that was under investigation had died by suicide, and it really, really took a toll on me in the sense that I felt awful. I felt terrible, and I felt like, even though I was part of this big team and I was a spoke in the wheel, you're still part of an organization that is conducting investigations. And it was incredibly impactful. And because I saw obviously how impactful it was for those that were around that circumstance. So it didn't leave me for the longest time. And actually I came back and I said, I don't wish to investigate this stuff anymore. I don't want to be part of this anymore. And it's just we have so many at that time. We had so many vulnerable members within the membership, and it just wasn't for me. So I was fortunate enough. There was a leader within professional standards at that time that said, "Okay, no problem." And I had a chance to be seconded to the Field Support Bureau. So I ran the crisis negotiation team. I was the coordinator of crisis negotiation for the province of Ontario for the OPP for 6 months. And then after that, I had another position for 3 months within Field Support Bureau, and it was called the Aboriginal Critical Incident Coordinator. So, Aboriginal isn't a word that's used anymore, but it's Indigenous, but that's what it was called then. And so I would teach at the Indigenous Awareness Training up in Mattawa. That's where it was at the time. And I had the opportunity to assist as the firekeeper for sweat lodge ceremonies. So it was absolutely an incredible experience. I was partnered with an Indigenous member of the Ontario Provincial Police, and I was assisting him in this process. And it was just, it was the first time in a long time where I actually felt a sense of peace. And, I had gone back. The secondments ended. I went back to professional standards. And honestly, it was within the first couple of days. I was attending a conference, and there was a discussion at that time about PTSD. I didn't know much about it, and it was on the board, and I was reading about all the signs and the symptoms and everything else. And I just got up and I left the room. I grabbed my buddy, who was the supervisor in PSB, who's a great guy, and I just said, you know what? I can't do this anymore, and from there, I took a couple of months off of work. I didn't really know what was wrong. And, you're trying to figure it out. Like, you're going back. This is 2014. Like, this is 11 years ago. Like, the resources, the disconnects, all those sorts of things. Like, this is such an evolving conversation. And it was almost like, I started some counseling at that time, but, you get 6 free sessions, and then the association, I really didn't know what the association did and the OPP did. And some of it was on me to know what that stuff was. I get that and I accept that. But there was just, there really wasn't a great understanding. So when I came back to work in January-ish of 2014, at that time, the OPP was doing a review for people that had been out of the workplace, and I gave my feedback as to, it was a siloed culture, and there was a lot of disconnects, and I didn't know which resources to get, and it was just an awful experience. But having come back, they said, "Hey, listen, we have a spot for you if you want it. Go for it, in the Provincial Police Academy." And I said, "Sure." And it was as a recruit instructor. So at that point in 2014, I went in. I was part of a cadre of some instructors, and at that time, Superintendent Dr. Hugh Stevenson was the director of the academy. And you know what? I'd work for that guy any day of the week, and just a great leader, and really gets it on many, many levels. And I'm very, very grateful for his leadership while I was in the academy. But we had a chance, and while I was there, we put through about 300 recruits, and and then all of a sudden, March the 6th, 2015 rolled around. So I don't know, that's sort of where my career sort of went to that point. And then March the 6th, 2015 happened. I was in the academy teaching and coordinating all the sexual assault and domestic violence programs in the province at the time. And we heard in the class that the RCMP had executed search warrants at OPP Association head office. And it was like, it's one of those moments that you remember where you were. And I hadn't been involved in the association for a good 12 years at that point. So I really didn't know. I was so detached. I had no idea about anything. Neither did anyone in the class. But there was a lot of concern because, the association is entrusted with so many aspects of the things that are associated with positive work environments and pensions and benefits and everything. So there was just a lot of misinformation, and there was a lot of concern. And, for the rest of the following few months, there were members all over the province attending meetings, and these rooms were packed full of members trying to figure out what was going on. And in the meantime, I was approached and said, "Hey, listen, you used to be in the association." And he said, when you had to have certain requirements, you had to have been a president before was one of the criteria, and I was. So, I put a lot of thought into it. I met with some people, and they said, "Hey, listen, you should do this." And sure enough, I made the decision at that point to run for the position of president and CEO of the Ontario Provincial Police Association.
Well, Rob, I just want to back up. We're going to get into your time there. You mentioned going off with an operational stress injury. And I got a question. You feel free to answer it or not. What's the effect on yourself and your family when you actually take that step and for yourself to take some time off?
Well, I can tell you in 2013, it's much different than it is today, first and foremost. So contextually speaking, the other thing is that we're so much more aware today of exactly what it is that we're dealing with. There's incredible supports that exist today, and we'll get into that stuff because much of what happened to me in my career, most of it positive, but the negative stuff gave me a window into some of the things that I knew that had to change. So, yeah, it was impactful on me, absolutely. It just strips you of your confidence. It affects you. I'm not saying I'm the same as everyone else, but when you're dealing with an occupational stress injury, it affects your sleep. It affects the things you think about. It affects your well-being, your physical, mental, everything. And so you try to keep as much of that from your family as possible. I know I did. I know it's not 100% possible. And I've always been, I respect my family's privacy. So I don't really do a deep dive and talk about any of that, because for me, that's their story, that's their journey to talk about. But I think we would be naive to think that first responders, don't bring this stuff home. And then it's, then I would say, getting back to your previous question, why it's important to be associated with things outside of work that are positive. It's important to associate with things outside of work in friendships and family and all those sorts of things to make sure that you're well balanced. Because for me, I was fortunate. I had those things. Even though I was dealing with this over here, I could get through it because of the balance and of what I had. So, I guess that's how I would sort of answer that question, Scott.
Now, Rob, you were mentioning that you had become the president of the OPPA. Can you tell us more about it? It sounds like you came in at a volatile time. What was going on?
Well, I don't think it's even arguable. I just think it was the most tumultuous time in the history of the Ontario Provincial Police Association. Like, I had, honestly, no idea the depths to which some of the challenges were. And, going in, obviously, one of the first things I did is I showed up, I was elected, and the members at that time, it was a provincial vote. And I had traveled the province on my own time and with my own money and everything else, and gave it my all. And the membership showed confidence in me. That said, the trust in the membership was at an all-time low. And everywhere I went, it was almost like I was taking the brunt of the anger that existed within the membership. And, I just happened to be the next guy, and I understood that was some of what I was signing up for. But also just coming into head office, and at that time, Leanna Maltby, who was the executive assistant to the president of the board, she was amazing. And I've known Leanna for a long time, and she's such a professional, and she's really, really good at what she does. And she was giving me a tour of the office, and it was really surreal because I'm like, I'm the next guy, and I'm getting this tour, and people are looking at me, I'm sure wondering, all right, who is this guy? And because I knew some of them, but I hadn't seen these people in a long time, and I was completely outsider. But at that time, being a complete outsider, having nothing to do with the association was actually a strength, because when we're talking about rebuilding an organization from a place of mistrust and a place of allegations and so on and so forth, you knew it was going to take time. The other thing is that, negotiations had been broken down for a year. So members were without a contract. The other thing that was outstanding was in 2014, the government wrote public sector unions, and they said, hey, listen, your copay of benefits, ceases, at the end of, December of 2016. And, the members, so I had 600 to 700 members that were potentially affected and would have retired soon enough had we not negotiated a deal with the government to make sure that those who were told were going to receive benefits for life continued to do that. And those people then didn't have to rush out the door. So there wasn't a brain drain. The other thing that we ran into was, the board of directors, there was 3 directors from the previous board who I didn't know. There was 3 directors that were elected on the new board that came from Congress, that are still there today. So you got Johnny Cerasolo, you got David Sabatini, you got Mike Adair, and then you got me. So I used to always joke it was kind of like 3-3 and me. And we had to come together and fix this place. And we had to lead it out of the darkness. And it was, I remember going to Leanna, and at university, when I was president of the Alumni Association, we would do strategic planning all the time. Like, it was second nature for us and for me. And I came into the organization and I said, okay, Leanna, I said, do you have a strategic plan? And, the most recent strategic plan that the association had at that time was about 8 years out of date. So imagine you're the largest police association in the country and you don't have a strategic plan. So I said, and for me, it's never been about blame. So I said, that's okay. I said, we're going to fix that. And you know what? We just put on the list of priorities. What's our priorities? Negotiations? Yes. Benefits? Yes. Strategic planning? Yeah, we'll get to it. What are the other things? And at that time, it was just working together as a team and, starting to get this thing moving forward, trying to earn respect one member at a time to earn and to maintain the respect of the membership. And that was not easy. So, and then at the same time, Kathleen Wynne was the Premier of Ontario. So the Liberal government. So, as far as policing was concerned, we were not, and that's how I feel, we were not a priority. They were focused on other issues. Policing was kind of down the list. And then you had, the commissioner and his command team of the day who were cautious, and rightly so, of the association based on what had just transpired. So that relationship with the commissioner and the senior leadership team was virtually non-existent. So we had to start with that as well. So, I'm being very candid today because that's what it was. And so that's kind of what I inherited. That, there's things I won't go into. There's, I don't want to, I could sit here all afternoon and talk about this stuff. But the bottom line is, the good thing is that when you look at where we are today, it's probably taken 3 contracts in 10 years to get the association into a beautiful place where, is there still work to be done? Absolutely. Is there still members that are out there that we need to earn and maintain their trust? Absolutely. But look at all the things that we have done. So when I first was in there, one of the things, and I challenged our board at the time, I said, we represent everybody. And at that time, so in the 2016, our entire board of directors went and marched in the Toronto Pride Parade. I had never participated in a Pride Parade before, but you know what? When you are the president and the board of directors, you are the president of everyone. And at the same time, so it was amazing. It was an incredible experience. We marched with OPP members, police, everything else. But then all of a sudden the activism kicked in. And from there on, we were kicked out of just about every Pride Parade that was occurring. And a lot of what I experienced in my time as president, right up until the George Floyd riots in the States in 2020, was always about defund, disarm, dismantle. And it was just one activist after another. And it really took a psychological toll on our people, I believe. And there were, many police officers and civilians of law enforcement, I think if they were to be honest, it gets at you after a while. And quite frankly, and I would say this to the government, and I talked about street checks a little bit earlier, when you're submitting, intelligence checks on people, when you get rid of that, or when you kick police officers out of pride parades, or you kick them out of schools, or you say all these nasty things, what you do is you create a climate in which it's okay to be disrespectful to police or to be violent to police. And all the things that we've sort of seen, as far as I'm concerned, has been somewhat as a result of the climate that was created with this very anti-police rhetoric. And, Doug Ford came in 2018, thank God, and has been an ally of law enforcement and has made a big difference ever since.
Well, thanks, Rob. I know that there's a bit of a story that kind of leads up to you wanting to do this Encompass thing. Can you elaborate on what triggered that with you? I believe it was around 2017, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
I think you were reelected by the membership at large for a second 3-year term in 2017.
Yeah, so the term that I initially got was 2 years of a 3-year term because the first year of the term was used up previously. And so I only had 2 years to really, we headed, off to Queen's Park and we were successful joining in some of the previous work that had been done by other associations and groups. And I went down to Queen's Park at the time with my vice president of the time, Chris Hoffman, and we spoke on the committee about presumptive legislation, and it was one of the big takeaways. And I really want to give a shout out. At that time, the Minister of Labor was a gentleman by the name of Kevin Flynn, and he has always been very pro mental health issues, and really deserves. If we were just calling it the way it is, balls and strikes, he really deserves a lot of credit for being very proactive in that regard. So, there was multiple things that were happening. And then, we kept rebuilding. And the only thing I want to talk about, too, is one of the paradigm shifts in the organization, Scott and Emily and the members that are listening to this, was when I got into this position and to sort of, the association always wears suits. And so I would get in there and we would be going to police memorials and police funerals and all this sort of stuff. But we would always be wearing suits. And many associations wear suits. And I don't take anything against my fellow brothers and sisters in the associations. They just know my position on it, that I personally think that we should be in number one dress for those occasions. And I remember going out west to an RCMP funeral. I was in a suit, and all the police officers were up front. I was at the back with like volunteer canine search and rescue, or I don't even know who I was with. I just knew that I wasn't with the people that I should have been with. And it was an awful feeling. And I came back to our board of directors, and this was, 2016, 2017 in that area. And I said, never again am I going to go to something like that without wearing my number one dress. And to me, it's this is my own opinion. Like I say, I have a ton of respect, and I understand why other associations wear suits. It's fine. And it's neat because my friends in other associations that wear their suits, they understand this is where I come from on this. But we had a board discussion, and I said to the board, the upcoming 2017 Peace and Police Officer Memorial in Ottawa, I want us all to be in our number one dress. And it started a conversation within the board. And I said, I'm going to tell you, that's what I'm wearing. And the rest of the board said, you know what, Rob, we're with you. And so we went in 2017 as a board. Obviously, David Sabatini is a civilian, but he wore the armband. He was with us, and he was all for it. And I give him a lot of credit for that. But when we marched in Ottawa in 2017 at the Peace and Police Officer Memorial to honor the fallen, it was incredible to be a number one dress. I felt so amazing. And I had a picture taken, and it sat in my office for the longest time of the board on Parliament Hill, a number one dress. And years later, people would always say, that's an old picture of the board. Why don't you take it down and put a new picture up? And I said, I'll put a new picture up, but that picture is there for a different reason. And what it represented was respect and a paradigm shift within the association. And we wear our number one dress now at all of these occasions. We don't even think twice. So just a little bit about that. But then as we're getting ourselves we're starting to get some direction. We're starting to get some wind in our sails. August of 2018 came around, and we had previously been down at Queen's Park. I was telling the people in committee at that time, I said the government of the day was bringing in Bill 175, the Safer Communities Act, and specifically Section 115 of that bill would have given the commissioner and the chiefs of police the ability to take people that are uniformed members that are diagnosed with an operational stress injury like PTSD and take you out of that and put you into a civilian position, take away your badge. And I'm going to tell you this, the coroner's report and all the other stuff backs up what we know. Identity is a big issue with policing. And I said, when you start messing with people, and this is exactly what I was telling people on this committee in the spring of 2018 in the government when they were bringing this in, I said, if you go ahead with this, you're going to be hurting officers and you're going to be hurting their families. In that summer, in August, just before that, we then increased our psychological supports from $1,500 a year to $3,500, and we increased the amount that you can use because we recognized as well that we needed more psychological supports. And then in August, we had 3 members of the OPP die by suicide. And I was with John Cerasolo at the time in Ottawa, and when I got that news, I was just stunned by the whole thing. And I remember walking around Parliament Hill thinking, we have to do better than this. And even though we've come so far and we fought for presumptive legislation and we got it, and we fought for increased benefits for psychological stuff, more needed to be done. And somebody had to speak about this because it was a conversation that needed to be had. So with the permission of the board of directors, I sat in my hotel room in Ottawa, wrote a letter out to the members, and we blasted it out. And then from there, I just went on media after media after media and, basically promising to do better. And I really give credit to the widows and their families of those who have died by suicide, who have died as a result of their jobs, and for inspiring and pushing us in the association to do better. And that's exactly what happened. So from the end of that in September, I remember coming back, sitting in my office and just taking out a piece of paper and saying, if we had to design a mental health program with money being no option, what would it look like? And I just came up with, it needs to be 24/7, 365. It needs to be bilingual because we have so many French speaking French people within the Ontario Provincial Police and their families. So it needs to be, not to mention the fact that we're a bilingual nation. I said we need to take the culture of the OPP, the OPP Association, and then we need to blend that with the culture of people and their backgrounds. So in my mind, based on my experience that I had in the OPP, my negative experiences, based on the cultural teachings I had from, learning Indigenous culture and teachings, in the power of culture, we blended that, and then we blended it with residential treatment and making sure that it's also a concierge. So when you reach out, you might not know what you need, but I said during the RFP process, when we were putting it together, I said, I want you to design this program that when somebody calls, whether it's the spouse, whether it's the member, whether it's the child, you wrap your arms around that person, you do not let them go, and we get them into treatment, whatever they need, as fast as we can get it to them. And that's the concept of Encompass. And that's exactly how that happened. The difficulty is the commissioner of the day announced his retirement. He was gone in the fall of 2018. And for about 6 months, there was a leadership vacuum in the OPP. And the OPP, I felt... I won't get into all that, but at the end of the day, there was a leadership vacuum, and we continued to push forward with Encompass Mental Health. And I'll tell you, in April of 2019, in my opinion, in my entire career, the best thing that ever hit us was the appointment of Commissioner Thomas Carrique to the position of commissioner. And you know what? I guess I can leave it at that until if you have any other questions, and I certainly can continue to walk this forward.
I know you ended up going. I know the benefits here for our members. They're negotiated outside of the collective agreement, which is somewhat different than most other places, and. The negotiations that concluded in May 2019, I believe you had a large part in this.
Yes.
You ended up... Yeah, so can you tell us what came out of that piece?
Well, yeah, so obviously, the president is responsible for, picking the negotiation team and sort of being the leader of the whole thing. And I had a lot of support at that time from Vice President John Cherasolo and others. But the end of the day, I made it really clear what I wanted, and the board of directors agreed. It was, you go after money, but it wasn't necessarily money that we needed. Although it's always good to get a raise, and we took as much as we could, and we fought for as much as we could. But at the same time, you're right. We negotiate things outside. We have the benefits transfer agreement, and to get into all that right now would be very challenging. It's a hard thing it's a hard thing to grasp without really getting into it. And so what happened is we negotiated. I went and I said, hey, listen, our folks need. I wanted to take that $3,500 a year cap. What we learned was caps create psychological barriers for people seeking treatment. We learned that people were, they were running out of benefits and stuff like that. So I said, let's just blow it up. Let's get unlimited psychological supports. And as the largest bargaining unit in Ontario for police at the time, when we do stuff like that, or when we bring in stuff like that, it raises... Like that tide that goes up is raising all the boats. So it's raising all the associations, the mediums, the smalls, the larges. And you know what? Ultimately, for our people, we just blew it up and got unlimited psychological supports. So when you go to your psychologist, your social worker, whatever you're going to, you just, some have direct billing. You get your reimbursement. It's just really, really seamless. And it really, really has been the most impactful thing. You asked me earlier what I was proud of. It's Encompass, but a big part of Encompass is the unlimited psychological supports that are within that. And I'll tell you, the number of people and some of the benefits of that it's the members. And you asked earlier about families. The number of families that are using this as well, spouses and children, is incredible. And we are so much further ahead as a result of unlimited psychological supports. I can't even put a value on it. I can tell you some of the testimonials that have come in of people calling up and saying, you know what, this saved my marriage. This kept me at work. This got me back to work. This saved my life. And when people are telling you things like that, it's incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly humbling. And that credit goes to the entire team, and the credit goes to the people who had, they're reaching out for service, and we're providing them with world-class supports. The other thing that we negotiated at that time was unlimited workplace safety and insurance board benefits. So when you're on WSIB, you're approved. Before, when I was first elected, civilians didn't get any. Uniform got 1 year. 2016, we negotiated a year for the civilians, 2 years for the uniform. And then in 2019, we just blew the doors off it, and we just went unlimited. And it's just been an incredible experience, and incredible. I believe that we're in the business as association leaders of providing leadership and services to the people that we represent. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of. So that's kind of it there, Scott and Emily, of where that kind of went. And then obviously this is pre-pandemic stuff. So coming up to March 30th of 2020, we went through, the program design, the program RFP, the program launch on March 30th. And it was about 18 months in total. And I stayed with that program the entire time. And I'll be honest, at the end of that whole thing, at the end of March, like 5 years ago, I was exhausted mentally, physically, and I couldn't hang on much longer. So it was nice. It was a nice pass off to, Dalton Associates, who has provided this service of Encompass to our members and their families. When you think about it, we have 5,000 retirees we're responsible for, and 1,000 surviving family members as well. That it's a true honor to take care of everybody. And 6,200 officers, 3,600 civilians. There's thousands of family members, and so when you do something like this, you can never measure the impact. So, and as we continue to grow and grow and grow and add depth and value and credibility. So that's it. We launched it in March 30th of 2020. Since that time, if I could just go on a bit here, we've had approximately 3,500 members and their families utilize Encompass since it was launched. We've had 389 critical crisis responses. And what that is somebody calling in absolute crisis. The good thing is the people that call in, they are talking to people that are trained, that understand OPP culture, that are trained in de-escalation and support, and they don't let them go, and they can get them treatment instantaneously. If you're just someone off the street and you wanted to go get a psychologist or something along those lines, the wait times for that are incredible. So what we did in 2020 is we joined with the Ontario Psychological Association and also gathered up multiple people to provide support to our people. So then we could speed up the wait times and get people who are in crisis or who need to go to residential treatment or whatever they need. Like there's basically nothing that this program doesn't offer. And so it was huge. So when that happened, the pandemic started to ramp up. And as we all know, that was an incredibly challenging time. And I knew at that time that I needed some additional support psychologically because, I had struggled previous to this, but I also struggled with the fact that we were losing members to suicide. And it was hard. And it's hard to say that it was hard when you're seeing families that, trust me, it was a lot harder on the widows and the families than it was Rob Jamieson. But at the same time, I had this feeling of being responsible, and it was a feeling that I couldn't shake. And it really took a toll on me. And I found myself attending Project Trauma Support residential treatment in Perth, Ontario, in May of 2020. And it's not something that I talked about. I talk about it in the book, but I only share it because I think it's really important to normalize these conversations. And so I went there. It was an incredible experience being around military, police, personnel. There was one outpost nurse and so on and so forth. These cohorts, there's male, there's female. Obviously, you're there with just guys. And then, I found it was a great opportunity. I don't talk about the experience. We're not supposed to talk about the experience because you don't want to ruin it for the next people that are going to attend. But it was life-changing, and it was an opportunity to get unstuck. So I left there, and I re-engaged with the association and, continued on. That said, Encompass continued to, it started to explode. There was such a demand. And the biggest thing was, because it was the pandemic, we couldn't get out and tell people about the program unless they were online or whatever was happening. And then in November of that year, which I made the decision in May earlier that I wasn't going to run for the position of president again. I was at the 5-year mark, and I realized I had given it my all, and I had it was a heck of an impact, and I had to be honest with myself. So I went back to Project Trauma Support in November, both times as president. And while I was there at Project Trauma Support, OPP officer Mark Hoving was murdered on Manitoulin Island. And, here I am in residential treatment, and one of our members was killed in the line of duty. And so I left. I checked myself out. I finished it up, and, I finished up the week, checked myself out, and at that time, too, we had one of our members really hurt badly at Sunnybrook. So he was taken to Sunnybrook Hospital. So I went there. I sat with his father and just tried to provide support to him as the role of president. A lot of the times, you're the person when these serious incidents occur that needs to show up, and you need to be there for others and make sure that they're reassured that they're supported. I left there, and I drove up to Manitoulin, and John Cerasolo, who's a prince of a man, was there with Dave Dubé. He's a great guy as well. And they had everything squared away with Commissioner Creek on the ground to support the family. And because the funeral was in the pandemic, it was really scaled down. And it was the last thing, that I ever did as president of the OPP Association in my number one dress, being there and representing the OPP Association, the members and their families, and trying to be there for the Hoving family and the members, and to do whatever I could. And then I drove back and took the stuff out of my office with my wife and daughters downstairs in the truck. And I was kind of looking down at them, and as I was taking the last things out of my office, and I felt really proud, but at the same time, I had this feeling that I was sort of letting them down. And but I had to be honest with myself. I needed to take some time, and I took the following 10 months off of work. I didn't realize it was going to take that long. You don't realize how hurt you are and how much support that you need. And it was a hell of a journey. But I made a promise to my wife and my kids and myself. I am going to get back. And I fought like hell, in counseling and just taking care of myself physically, mentally, as best as I can. And to the people that are out there, you hear things sometimes about, this person's faking, or they just want this off, or they want that off. My experience is not that. My experience in being off, it's not a lot of fun. And it's anyone that would want to be off for the sole purpose of this, with all the stigma and the commentary and everything else, and the phone stops ringing and everything, and sort of life goes on for everybody. And in your reality, you're in a new reality, and it's awful. It really is. It's awful, and I don't wish that on anybody. So Encompass, the beautiful part about Encompass, and what's great about it is that the people that work at Encompass are absolutely champions. And, it's, thousands of emails, thousands of phone calls go out every month to everybody that's enrolled in the program. And we have people that are still enrolled in Encompass from year one, a high percentage, and they get touchbacks. They get people touching in with them. And that's part of the success of the program as well, that people never feel forgotten. So I managed to, in 21, go back to work. I ended up getting involved with the Criminal Intelligence Service Ontario. It was an incredible position, never had done before, and I was responsible for coordinating joint forces and foreign operations. So what that was is I had about 15 organized crime groups, everything from anti-terrorism to biker enforcement, those groups. My job was to coordinate with them, but also coordinate with the United States law enforcement agencies. So I had the DOA, the DOJ, Department of Justice, FBI, DEA, ATF, Homeland Security, NYPD, Michigan State Police, all these folks. So I was up at the United States Embassy in Ottawa, or we would go to United States ambassadors' residence in Ottawa, or I work with these people all over the place, and just really, really professional people that wanted all the same things that we wanted, to really tackle organized crime. And then I was asked to be the liaison for the Indigenous Police Chiefs of Ontario. So, that was like Akwesasne, Rama, Six Nations, Anishinaabe Police Service, Wikwemikong, UCCM, Anishinaabe Police Service, or NAPS, Treaty 3, Lac Seul, all these things. So there's always been a something constant from my early days in my early 20s. I've always had these contacts or these engagements with Indigenous people, Indigenous communities, and quite frankly, I loved every minute of it. And it's something that's a certain highlight of my life. And I certainly could go on, but it was an incredible job. But after a year, I felt like, what? I didn't necessarily leave the association the way that I wanted to. And I decided, I'm going to give my return to work a shot. And, it was the fall of 2022. I decided to run for, I knew I wasn't going to be president, but I ran for director of the OPP Association to get back on the board. And, to the credit of the people in the Congress, I give them a lot of credit because they were the people that put me back into my position on the board of directors. And I'm extremely grateful to them. And they know who they are. And, I was away for 2 years. I didn't have a vote because I wasn't on the board. I wasn't with a branch. And those branches, I came through 18 branch, but there was many branches that supported me, many people that supported me. And they've given me a second chance to return to work and to retire with my dignity intact, while also having an opportunity to provide leadership and supports to our team and to the people that are out there. So, and to work with Encompass again, and Dalton Associates, and the branch presidents, and the staff. The staff at head office are second to none. I look how far we've come in 10 years, and I see the development within the branches, the development at staff, the development on the board, the services, the depth in what we're doing. Scott and Emily, and to the members listening and the families, I could not be prouder. And like I said, there's always more to do. And I know some of the things that we're working on right now, some really exciting things that will be, down the road. And, hopefully there's these great pronouncements. I don't want to get out in front of anything, but we're always looking at ways to provide better leadership and better supports to the people that we represent. And, this past, a couple of months ago, I did some soul searching, and as of May 30th this year, my full 30 years is April 24th. That will be my last day at work. And, I have nothing but, respect for the OPP, and respect for the OPP Association. And, not to say that everyone always gets it right, because they don't. Not to say that people shouldn't be held accountable, because they should. But it really starts with holding yourself accountable. And I've always tried to do that. I've always tried to treat people the way that I want to be treated. And, it's been a good go. And there's a few people that obviously I guess I could leave it at that, Scott, but obviously there's a bunch of people that clearly deserve to be recognized and to thanked. And I certainly would like to do that as well.
What an incredible career journey, Rob. I mean, wow. We really appreciate everything that you've shared with us today, and we're not done. So you're retiring, but you're certainly not done. You have a book coming out. So first of all, that's a significant achievement. Congratulations on that. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and what spurred you on to want to write this book in the first place?
Well, I appreciate the question, and I think, when I started this book was when I first went off, and I couldn't have written this book or even my thoughts down at the time because I found that I needed to get into a place where, I was healthy and could really write a book that was high level, it was professional, it was uplifting, and it wasn't just about pointing out problems or bashing people or any of those sorts of things. It was about recognizing some of the challenges and then offering solutions. And, the book is, called it In Pursuit of Mental Wellness in the First Responder Community. And I really have to give a shout out. So I have a writer. So I worked with a writer. Her name is Laurie Stephens, and she's incredible. She was in the Premier's office when Bob Rae was Premier, but she saw firsthand the Premier's security detail from the OPP. She has the utmost respect for police, and she really gets the mental health pieces. And we were brought together by a mutual friend, and she has done a phenomenal job, and she is doing all this work pro bono, as am I. And all the proceeds of In Pursuit of Mental Wellness in the First Responder Community are going to survivors of law enforcement, the Soul Sisters, Canada Beyond the Blue, and Boots on the Ground. And those three organizations will get any and all proceeds of these books. They'll get awareness, which they most absolutely deserve. They're incredible people. You look at Dave McLennan and Boots on the Ground. You look at Dilnaz Garda from Canada Beyond the Blue. Those leaders. You look at Nancy McDonald, the president of Survivors of Law Enforcement. You could not ask for better leaders and better organizations. So all of this goes to them. That said, the book opens up. There's a foreword. We have a special guest as the foreword, but the first chapter is opened up by one of our widows, and whose husband in the OPP died by suicide. And it was before Encompass Mental Health was available. And then it sort of goes into a little bit about what we talked about today, so people have a little bit of an understanding of who I am. And it's written from the perspective, and I said to my writer, I do not want this to be written from the perspective of, look at me, look at me, look at me. I don't want that. I've never been like that. I don't respect that. But you have to understand a little bit about where I'm coming from and what I've experienced in order to understand. So then the 2018 suicides of the OPP, the three members, really was the catalyst for Encompass. And it talks about the whole process, which we've kind of talked about here today, about the design, the implementation, the launch, and then it talks about the statistics of the whole program, and it really shows people what we were dealing with. So, and then there's really mixed in there as well. We have some other firsthand accounts of active members and a former member that have utilized Encompass, and how it really played a huge role in their lives. And it's just to see where it is now. It just got edited. It's going to be available on Amazon. I understand that this podcast will be out later on. I'm hoping to have this out in April. And like I said, we're going to be pushing hard for it and getting it out there and raising awareness, normalizing conversations, reducing stigma, and raising funds for these first responder organizations, these incredible organizations. And, I can't thank the people that were involved with this enough. And I really felt, what's interesting, to answer your question a little bit further, Emily, I had a mutual friend that has a police officer friend who retired in the States and has suffered an occupational stress injury, but also comes from an organization that when he was talking to me earlier today, I said, you know what, you guys are where we were 10 years ago. And part of the reason why I wrote the book was I want people to be able to get it, read it, and understand that there is faith, there is hope, and there is a solution, and this is what's worked for us. And then when you look at this book, like there's the provincial program that was launched last year as well, which provides greater supports to not just the OPP members, but fire, police, paramedics, some of their families. And now the RFP from the government has gone out, and a company has been awarded the contract to Warrior Health to provide Encompass-like supports to paramedics and firefighters and corrections and police. So all those people out there that used to look at Encompass and say, we want that, we want that. Now you're seeing something that started in this lane with the Ontario Provincial Police Association starting to get traction throughout the province to provide greater supports to almost 80,000 first responders in the province of Ontario. So who knew that starting something like this could start that wave to provide greater supports to so many more people. So I like to see this book go out there. I like to see some organizations who are still challenged with these issues, like even more so than we, like sort of where we were, and use it as kind of a information or a how-to guide and a hope, in keeping hope that, you can provide world-class supports. Now, Encompass Mental Health with unlimited psych, all that stuff, I don't know of any other program that offers what this does. It's world-class. And it really has been a beacon for so many. And there's a lot of people that have looked over the fence and said, how did you get that? What is that? And it's created a lot of conversation. So I just want to continue to drive people in the OPP. This is your program in the OPP Association. This is your program. So, look into it, reach out. The supports are there. And, I couldn't be more proud of our team. And like I said, I'm extremely proud of this program. And we know that we're saving lives. We know that we're keeping marriages together. We know that we're supporting people and their families and addictions and the crises that, everyday families go through. Mental health isn't just limited to first responders. It's something that every one of us has to keep in check. And I hope by telling this story and opening up a little bit, we continue to make a significant difference into the lives of so many people. And I'll tell you, by seeing other people heal, it's allowed me to start my journey of healing as well. It makes me feel good. And you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it at that.
Thanks so much, Rob. This has been a really, really great episode. We're actually approaching the end. So do you have any final words for our listeners, Rob?
Well, I just want to make sure that, no one person, I believe, in the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child, but I think that it actually takes a village your entire life. And I've said that for so long now. And, I couldn't have accomplished anything without the support of my family and everyone from my mom to my dad to my grandparents, and everyone, my Indigenous teachings that started at a very young age, and the things that resonated with me, the people I've worked with, the board members, past and present. I also want to thank, OPPA President John Cerasolo. And John and I have been friends for 10 years. He was my right hand as my vice, but, as a director on the board now, he's always been so welcoming of having me come back on the board. And it takes a certain person to have a former president sit on the board as a director. And while you're still, it's his turn to be president. And he's been a great president. And, he's a good guy. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point him out. David Sabatini, look at, the first civilian, director, it wasn't the first civilian director, but he's the first civilian to ever occupy the position of vice president, and I've gotten to know David really well over the years. He's a good guy. You got Mike Adair, Dave Dubé, Lynn Neal, Terry Hubbard, all great people on the board of directors, and really always have the interests of the membership at heart. And I really want to thank them for their friendship and their service and their commitment. I want to thank all the OPP members that I've had the privilege to call friends and I've worked with. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the OPP Veterans Association as well. When I came in, it was, the presidents I've worked with and the different people I've met along the way. So much of what we have today is because of the veterans and the work that they've done. We stand on their shoulders. We truly do. And as we retire, and I'll be retiring, there'll be the next generation. And we did what we could. I want to thank Premier Doug Ford as well. And there's a lot of times when I needed certain things that I knew that I always had an ally in law enforcement. And, he has been just a breath of fresh air. And, you're not going to find a leader in policing that is more steadfast in, just having your back. So I really have appreciated Doug for that. And lastly, I want to thank Commissioner Carrique. I kind of touched on him earlier, but when he came in 2019, to me, in my entire career, the last 30 years, he's been the best thing that's ever hit us. And that's my own opinion. And I had a true partner when he came in. He came in at a time, we were both outsiders. So we kind of got each other. I was an outsider of the association. He was an outsider coming in. We were dealing with the mental health issues. And obviously we had to be successful. Failure was not an option. And we immediately hit it off. And you will not find anyone, like him. Like, quite honestly, I think he's been the best police leader I've ever seen. And honestly, you don't see former police association people saying these things normally about, but I've never subscribed to that. I call balls and strikes. If you're a good person, I don't care what rank you are. You're a good person and you mean well. And Commissioner Carrique has been that person for me. I've seen what he's done for the organization. And when it comes to mental health, he's been such a leader in this regard. So I just want to thank him. And I want to thank, those in the OPP. You know who you are. You've made a difference. And to all the people that are out there, that I've met along the way, that we talk once in a while, or they'll reach out, or, just touch in and I'll check on them, just keep on doing what you're doing. And it's been a real privilege and a pleasure to be a member of the Ontario Provincial Police, and by extension, the OPP Association. So just all the staff, everybody, and to you, Emily and Scott, you've done an amazing job with these podcasts. And it's a real privilege to be here today. And thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me and to hear my story and my perspective on the OPP Association and the OPP.
Thank you so much, Rob, for joining us today. And we wish you all the best regarding your upcoming book release and in your retirement.
Thank you so much.
You have been listening to retiring OPPA Director and former OPPA President Rob Jamieson talking about his extensive career and his new upcoming book. Very exciting. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice so you never miss an episode. New episodes are currently being released each month. If you have any questions or any ideas for future episodes, please email us at communications@oppa.ca. Until next time, thanks for listening and stay safe.